Good morning and welcome. Thank you for registering and attending today's masterclass, which is all about forecasting and budgeting and how ideas have developed a fantastic tool to help. This is actually our first masterclass of 2022, and we are so delighted to be back. Who knew that 2 years ago, when COVID or coronavirus as we knew it then would be impacting us so much this far down the line? However, there is a good air of optimism across the UK and hopefully the rest of the world as well, and the new normal does seem to be settling into place. There are still lots of positive cases in the UK, but thankfully the impact and how ill people are feeling is significantly reduced. I'm so pleased to be joined by Neil Kaur from Ideas today, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion. I know it's going to be a good one. It's 10 a.m. It's Wednesday, February the 9th, 2022, and I am Jane Pendlebury, the CEO of HOSPA, the Hospitality Professionals Association. Please do ask questions throughout this morning's masterclass using the Q&A option. Neil and I will attempt to address as many of those questions as we can, but if there isn't enough time to answer any of your queries, we will get back to you afterwards. There will be a recording and a summary of the key points available on the HOSPA website within the next day or so, as soon as we've got that edited and fit for public viewing. Thank you for joining us. I'm sure the next 40 minutes will not only be interesting, but it will also be informative. I am going to hand over to Neil now, who's going to tell you a little bit about the product, set the scene so that we know where we are. Neil.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks very much. So Jane obviously needs no introduction. I'm delighted to be hosting this chat today with Jane. As she said, I'm Neil Kaur, so I've been with Ideas for the best part of a decade. I'm Director of Emerging Innovation Sales, so that involves moving away from our sort of core offering of revenue management solutions and some of our novel technologies, one of which we want to share with you today. So in the spirit of that, I've got a quick introduction by way of a video. So I'm just going to play that now. So thanks for indulging us in that short video. The theme really of that is all about making it count. So what we've been doing in recent years at Ideas is trying to address the fact that we're trying to move beyond guest room forecasting. So the sort of subject of today's conversation with Jane is how we moved away from just talking about total revenue management to discussing total revenue forecasting. So we've been under increasing pressure to respond to industry demand for the need to move beyond rooms, guest room, resident forecasting into the wild, wild west of food and beverage forecasting and ancillary lines of business. So what we wanted to discuss today, and I'm going to be picking Jane's brains a little bit on her experiences dealing with industry peers for many, many years, is how close we are to sort of achieving that nirvana and providing that link now between revenue management and finance. So when we talk about total revenue management, do we actually mean it? So in our efforts at Ideas to create an automated and uniform forecasting and budgeting process, that obviously means that it's got to respond to the demands of the total hotel level, the total resort level, and sort of from an enterprise perspective. So what we mean by that is that kind of holistic, consolidated centralization So one of those elements has really been about moving beyond revenue management, looking at encompassing reservations, but then extending that into our conference and banqueting personas, and on offering a solution that will help with the operational side of the business, picking up banquets and catering, food and beverage outlets. The key, though, really, and again, I know I don't look it, but believe me, I'm old enough to remember back to the sort of Baja days and the constant struggle that we had with finance and revenue management. The big part of that was often, and again, for ideas, this has been challenging because for 30 years, we've been in kind of an echo chamber, really, just talking to revenue management and commercial leaders, is understanding that a demand forecast from a revenue management perspective is not the same as an operational financial forecast. And subsequently, finance leaders have not really been trusting the demand forecast of RMS systems because it's not that single source of the truth. And I know, Jane, you had some interesting insights in this perspective in terms of the sort of fiscal reporting process.
Yes, there's standards, aren't there, throughout the industry with the uniform system, and we're all aware of revenue management. I imagine most of the people on this webinar are aware of revenue management, and the brilliant forecasting and ideas has led the way in that for many for many years. But from the finance point of view, there has been less looking forward, or from a digital point of view. There's obviously been forecasting, there's been tools out there that people have used through spreadsheets. And now with the standard reporting, which is being more and more adopted with the uniform system of accounts for the lodging industry, the USALI as it's known, there's lots of different requirements of the whole business to look forward into the finances of the future. So your tool seems to be an ideal solution to get there, to help those people get those figures and consolidate them into a readable and easy to view format.
And I think as well, what we found, Jane, is that it's not a silver bullet. There's still many other complexities, particularly when you are going to tackle things like food and beverage and other income, financial revenue forecasting. But what we've really been investing in over the last 5 years in ideas is sort of bringing that to bear. So it's been uncomfortable at times for us because it's involved opening up conversations with CFOs, financial planning and financial planning analysts who are looking for a very different way to approach financial forecasting. And so if you're going to say, oh, we've got this new transformative technology, it's coming from a revenue management space, we've also had to be cognizant of the fact that just saying we're going to eliminate spreadsheet dependencies is not always that comforting to the finance community, kind of quite like spreadsheets, not to characterize them. And particularly in operations, Jane, so I don't know if you found that. We found when we speak to ops directors, F&B, really seasoned F&B operators who like doing manual capture ratio, sleeper diner forecasting, average check projections, to say overnight that you're going to automate this whole process can be a little bit overwhelming.
Well, I think depending on the skill set, it's very easy for finance people who, as you say, tend to love their spreadsheets and are much more sophisticated with their spreadsheets and the way that they work. That's easy for them to say, right, I've produced this great format for all the different department heads to come forward with their forecast. But put that, it might not be that complicated, but to somebody who's not working on spreadsheets day in, day out, to put that in front of a bars manager, a restaurant manager, a spa manager, whatever it might be, and say, oh, just fill in that spreadsheet for us, can be a massively daunting task for them. And I always think back to that stat that I've been quoting for years, and I did actually look it up to see how long I've been quoting it for. And it was in 2008 that, I'm just going to check my details here, Ray Pankow, who was professor of IT manager at the University of Hawaii, made the statement that close to 90% of spreadsheet documents contain errors. And I'm sure that's true. And I think anybody who's ever worked on spreadsheets has found people overwrite cells that they shouldn't overwrite and all those sorts of things. So I think to make that whole process easier for the finance department, who are the experts on consolidating data, but to let all the people feed in to a central point is crucial, and to make it easy for them, because what's easy for one person isn't easy for the next. So I'm sure if you asked many accountants to make a cocktail, they wouldn't do it as proficiently as the bar manager, but likewise, the bar manager isn't going to use a spreadsheet as efficiently as the finance director. So we all have different skills. And this, I think, helps transform that process of getting the information to the finance department. A lot of pressure, I believe, has been put on department heads over the years. And I remember a story from many years ago now. I had a member of my team who was utterly brilliant in everything that she did. And I had no reason to question her ability, her dedication, her loyalty. Everything was fabulous about her. And it came to our first year of forecasting. So I had said, oh, we just need to do this forecast, just, pan out what we're doing for the next year. And left to do it. And the day that we were meant to sort of submit these forecasts, she didn't come into work and said she was ill. Didn't give it a second thought because she was totally reliable member of staff. And sometime later, she said to me, I couldn't come in that day because I knew I hadn't done my forecast. I knew I hadn't done the budget correctly. I couldn't face it. I think she genuinely was making herself ill. So I did it for her. And then it was a big eye-opener for me that you can't just expect everybody to be able to deliver these things year in, year out, and be able to look at it with fresh eyes each time. That was a very long answer to your short question, sorry.
No, but when we discussed, I remember we had this conversation at the HOSPA event last year, and it reminded me, and again, what we're not always very good at is transporting ourselves back to when we actually went through the trauma of the forecast and budget process. So I was thinking back at my time at Devere and at Whitbread and other companies I've worked for, where it was properly stressful. I mean, when you go into profit planning, particularly in the budget season, it was quite a traumatic experience, if I'm honest. So what we've tried to do through technology is respond to that demand, to just have better, just to harness technology better, just to try to look at where finance and revenue management converge, and can you come up with a kind of holistic one-stop shop solution. In this workflow here, for example, you can see how that sort of fiscal reporting process can really benefit things like your sales and marketing strategy as well. So when you're setting a business plan, at the same time, a solution that can really help execute the operational plan as well, and importantly, encompass food and beverage, other income, sales and catering, all of those components. So we've had some really interesting conversations with finance leaders, and HOSPA has been a great vehicle for that, because it gives you a chance to test those theories and put them to the test. And again, what we found is we're being reminded by hoteliers and operators that they have a daily flash report, they have a gross revenue report, they need a daily snapshot of all revenues, how they're performing on a daily basis. And things like forecast accuracy, which in revenue management has always been a bit, we always push back a bit, say, well, forecast performance is a better metric. Forecasts are meant to be wrong. Short-term forecasts are volatile, long-term forecasts are more risk averse. However, finance leads, they want to know forecast accuracy, and many general managers, for example, are targeted and compensated in some cases on that basis. So we've had to really come out of our comfort zone as well. Another question we get asked a lot is, why do I need and this is typically from the revenue management community, and again, please ask questions and contest this viewpoint, but what I hear a lot of on a daily basis, speaking to hoteliers globally and revenue managers, is I have a revenue management system forecast. Why do I need a financial rooms forecast? That seems like a bit of a luxury, particularly in the current climate where demand has been at kind of an all-time low post-pandemic or through the pandemic. But it's just really making that distinction between an operational and financial forecast and a rooms demand forecast. So something that's driving decisions, publishing, distributing decisions, inventory controls, overselling levels. That's all well and good, and that's vital, and you can't take that out. But what you do need is to recognise that the finance community need a financial forecast for the entire hotel or the entire enterprise in some cases. Yes. And just before, sorry, Jane.
No, I was just going to say it can all be done, can't it? If you have a lovely revenue management system and you've got your forecast from that, then certainly you could work out that if we're anticipating being at 90% occupancy at the weekend, we can expect this and this and this. But what this is doing, if I'm understanding correctly, is it's just automating that process and just putting all those algorithms into place, and it will move as the demand is moving, as it's increasing, or the cancellations coming in, God forbid, but whatever it might be, it's just that permanent, constant reminder of how things are very, very likely to pan out, because we know now the accuracy of these revenue management systems over the years has got better and better. And that will help with so many things, like with staffing, with planning, with rotoring, all the bits and pieces, even supplies for kitchens and all those other bits and pieces. And it just takes out a whole lot of the grunt work, doesn't it? Because it's there once it's all set up and in place. People can be confident and look to see what they can expect to be happening next week, next month, whatever it might be.
And I think that's a great point, because I think in revenue management terms, we've been obsessed with integration for so long, but really we've only been talking about sort of integration with, property management systems, revenue distribution systems. But actually, when you get into the financial planning space, what we've realised is it's more the kind of point of sale integrations that are important, and not so much the integrations, but the output to enterprise reporting platforms and finance systems. So that's been really, really important for us to get our heads around as well. So again, what I want to share really quickly, and then discuss with Jane and for those of you on the call, is really to understand the concept. It's more about the concept and the methodology, whichever tool you use. We've come up with a solution we called Ideas Rev Plan that we've been rolling out quite extensively now. We're live in about 300 properties across about 15 brands, about 1,000 primary users of this solution. Predominantly still the revenue management and commercial leaders working with finance. And we had a really nice success story that's available on our website, a case study from Radisson Hotel Group in EMEA. They actually credited a day a week saving in terms of data preparation, data gathering, using a tool like RevPlan, which had obviously significant efficiencies, operational efficiencies that brings, but also cost saving. So an entire day a week saved in terms of the collation of manual spreadsheets and consolidating all the stuff you talked about, Jane, in terms of, I remember version control nightmares where you'd have one central report, everyone would feed into it, and then it'd be out of date the minute you submitted your forecast. So that whole fiscal submission process as well, which groups like Radisson and others are now the beneficiaries of. And again, what we found is, and again, this schematic we're here really, and we've seen this play out across many of the large brands who have built either proprietary solutions, other systems that do similar things. We deliberately made a conscious effort not to get involved with the P&L side, the payroll and the planning side. In that instance, there's plenty of systems out there that obviously do that and underpin a lot of the tech stacks in major hospitality organizations. What RevPlan does is really seek to consolidate and harness, automate all of those consolidated forecasts, as you can see in this example. So all of your point of sale data that's feeding into your the back office system of your property management. Importantly, all of those food and beverage transactions, be they residents, be they non-residents, all of those outlets, pulling in sales and catering data. So some of you, I know that segment has really suffered in recent months due to the pandemic, but pulling in that sales and catering data is really critical. And then again, you can see from the illustration, you end up with pretty much every transaction within your organization having the ability to automate forecasting and budgeting, even extending to ancillary revenues. So spa systems, golf systems, all of that information being pulled in. So a lot of this does involve transformative change, mapping of transaction codes to send everything into your property management system. But importantly, can finance and IT harness the output? So is all of that data then sent to your finance system? And that's in a nutshell really how our solution RevPlan seeks to address it. And I know, Jane, you've probably seen other solutions as well out there that are trying to do sort of similar things in this space.
Yes, there are lots of systems, and different systems suit different people for different reasons. I think the beauty of this is that it's pulling in from, again, various systems within either a single unit or multiple units into a head office environment, and we'll be pulling in from different systems, but consolidating that into a single point and a single version of the truth, to coin that phrase. But it's interesting to pick up on the comment from Radisson there that they freed up a day a week. And I think in your video it said get your weekends and evenings back, which I think strikes a chord with I'm sure the presenters today and also the majority of the audience. I think the demand on anybody working in hospitality at the moment, whatever level, is enormous, and we are all probably going way beyond what we're paid to do, because we love our industry so much. But freeing up some time is great, but hopefully that in turn means that it's more time to spend either guest facing or looking after your teams on a one-to-one basis as well, rather than just sort of saying, I need this, I need this, I need this, all the demands for facts and figures, to actually have some time to explain perhaps why you need those figures, or the value of getting those figures correctly presented is really great. So that freeing up of time, it's true of most systems, let's be honest, but I think this one is one that's going to make it a lot easier in most environments, really, whether it is a single unit or across multiple hotels in a chain or group. Should be great.
And I think as well, Jane, what you've said really resonated in terms of, I think revenue management or revenue managers have typically, that we've been guilty of being martyrs sometimes. We love loads of work. We love the thrill of putting in all that analytical effort. But again, a lot of what we've heard as well is, does this solution do CRM, or does it do BI, or does it do, and we kind of almost fall into that trap of let's just try and nail this one first before like broadening it out into solving all the problems in hospitality and all the opportunities. So we try to really focus on that core piece, which is how do we move beyond guest rooms into total hotel or resort financial forecasting and budgeting. So we believe this is really going to address and alleviate some of those forecasting and budgeting headaches. And again, we'll of course share some of this content. It will be available on the HOSPA and the Ideas website. Just an example of some of those workflows. So obviously I can't share with you the algorithms and the secret sauce behind everything, but these workflow examples will hopefully give you some guidance. If you are trying to come up with a proprietary or in-house solution to address this, move beyond Access databases, Excel spreadsheets and the like. And again, the nice thing is now I think we're seeing some really responsible tech projects that involve, bolting on multiple different solutions within a kind of data lake or a data warehouse environment that can alleviate that. And whether or not you use a solution like RevPlan to do the heavy lifting, to provide the automation and the science to output to your end goal solution, then that's great as well. So, the rooms forecasting workflow examples, have a real think about the F&B forecasting. What is it you're trying to actually forecast? The KPIs you're using today, are they fit for purpose? Do you actually talk to your operators and your finance director? Things like capture ratios, average bill or average check values, revenue per available seat hour, all of these metrics that are available and we baked into our solution, responding to the industry demand for financial forecasting of those KPIs and those metrics. So just some things to think about here. And again, just before I open up, and I'm going to put Jane on the spot with some questions, and then we're going to take your questions as well. I see some content in the chat. Don't forget other income forecasting. It's always really amazed me, Jane. I don't know how you feel about this, but in the kind of all the years I spent in hospitality, the kind of neglect because of technology in things like spa, golf, outlet, parking, laundry, photo, whatever it is. Essentially, if there's a transaction code and you're sending that back to your property management system, why aren't you using automated forecast methodology to really use data science to optimize that? So we found a lot of our clients have been more excited actually about the other income forecasting component, because they'll go to their outlet managers, their spa and golf managers, and say, you don't have to use spreadsheets anymore. You can use this single stop solution that revenue management are using, the F&B are using, the sales and catering are using. You can use it as well.
Yes, and of course, Ideas have got you're built on forecasting. The whole premise of your solution and all your history is on forecasting rooms, and it has always been that way. That was how revenue management came about in the very first way in hotels when we took the idea from the airlines. And I think it's been long talked about, this total revenue forecasting, and lots of people have tried to get there. And I'm sure there's finance directors listening in today who've got tools in place to get a lot of this information. But a lot won't, and a lot will be relying on much more, I don't want to use the word guesswork, but there will be sort of some guessing going on. And this will actually consolidate, formulate, make more accurate the forecasting based on the facts that you already have, and looking back as Ideas and revenue management systems do. So it's a departure from sort of just a pure revenue management system where a revenue manager is only looking at rooms revenue. But it's something that I've been saying for many years, excuse me, sorry, many years now, is that a revenue manager at the very beginning of their career, if we go back to 2000, they would be head of reservations and they would be just looking at rooms. And that has evolved over time, over the last 20 or so years, to become a full-on commercial strategic role. And a revenue manager is no longer necessarily promoted because they did a good job in reservations. It's an analytical, it's a statistical role. And I think they have been looking for a solution like this for a very long time, along with the finance people who are backing up those revenue managers and commercial directors, to get these figures in a way that they can ask all the different departments without putting the money under any undue pressure to get that, to share that information across. So it's a different sales process for you, I'm sure, selling this than it is selling your historical revenue management program.
Definitely, and Jane, I think as well, it's encouraged, vendors and solution providers to show a lot more humility, because I think in many respects, I've been to so many HOSPA and HOSPACE events where revenue management are always sort of saying, "Oh, we need a place at the top table. No, we're not taken seriously enough. We do all this amazing analytical work, but then the finance director just overrides it with his own forecast, or the ops director." So I think to my mind, and you could say, I've got a vested interest in having this opinion, but I've really noticed that actually this is a far nicer way to address that challenge, by collaboration with operations and finance, rather than sort of this constant battle between, we're the analytical guys, you need to give us a seat in the C-suite or on the top table. We found some great conversations have taken place with revenue management, finance and operations as a result of this approach. And again, those benefits really extend throughout. So thinking about it more holistically, the benefits for the organisation about having a centralised platform for financial forecasting, not just demand forecasting, that speaks to commercial operations, finance, and obviously from an executive perspective as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I think picking up on your point about your revenue managers, they are a lot more valued than they used to be, for sure. I think it is they're commanding much better salaries, much of their worth, to value their worth. So all this can only help. So I can imagine some hotel revenue managers, directors, commercial directors will be looking at this product, and in other different environments it will be the finance person who's kind of rubbing his hands in glee because he can get his hand on a product that will do this. It will depend on the environment who's going to really look at it.
I think that's a really key point, Jane. Yeah, and again, sorry to add to that, what we found is actually VPs of revenue in many of the conversations we've had have got huge credit for opening the door to this debate and actually being the instigator for those conversations. It might be the CFO that ultimately is going to sign the check on a new solution or a new approach, but I think that's really important what you said there.
Yeah. I was just going to I'll ask you, the audience, our delegates listening in today, if they've got any questions, do feel free to put them in the Q&A tab. But I think you've got some more to say, Neil, haven't I, before I open it up to the floor?
Yeah, well, I was going to push back on you actually, Jane, because I've got a few questions for you. So I didn't want to sort of talk too much about the technology. I know you're very passionate, as HOSPA are, about the sort of people element of this. And again, it might be a bigger challenge for some of you. I mean, many of you on the masterclass today, I'm delighted that we've actually had conversations with your companies, or we're learning all the time about the problems that you're trying to solve in terms of financial forecasting and budgeting. It might be an automation conversation, it might be a people-led conversation, but again, we would love to hear from you with your views on this subject. How achievable do you think it is through people, process, and ultimately technology to harness all of that? Should we take a couple of questions there, Jane? We've got anything in the chat?
Yes, I think there's one here about just the budgeting process. So is this the question here? I think it's quite long-winded. I think what it's asking is this a constant flow? Is this just, I'm going to paraphrase it in my words, it's going to be easier. Is this a system that is working constantly all the time rather than just at a budgeting? So is it like your ideas revenue management system where people can come in daily and have a look to see what the forecast is? Or is it when it's a budgeting time, is this when this comes to its sort of magnificence?
Yeah, so it's a great question and one that's twofold. And again, we've had to be very careful with terminology that we've used because a lot of clients that I've been talking to have talked about optimize. How often does the system optimize? Well, typically to me, revenue optimization is the publishing, is the decision management solutions. With a solution like RevPlan, it's basically taking sort of business day end transactions and then preparing the forecast, in many cases up to sort of 10 years into the future. In tandem, it's also driving the budget process. So if you remember that fiscal sort of workflow that we showed, that's the key bit for me, is that this solution and potentially other solutions are providing automated forecasting on a daily basis for a snapshot well into the future across all revenue streams, combined with a revenue management system that's doing the publishing. So it actually has its own independent forecast methodology for rooms and resident guest forecasting. The F&B is the new bit because we don't have that today in revenue management systems, and obviously the other income piece. So it's not the kind of intraday processing. If you speak to most F&B operators and finance directors, they're not that comfortable with the idea of multiple forecasts optimizing on a daily basis 15 times a day. What they want is the single version of the truth on a daily snapshot, visualized through a total revenue report or a daily flash report. And that process to be in place moving forward, particularly post-pandemic. So we've put this solution into hotels that haven't even opened yet because the historical data is pretty much rubbish for the last 2 years. 2019 data is far more effective, as a standpoint, as a reference point, I beg your pardon. But also the next 8-week trend. So a lot of big hotels with major food and beverage outlets and restaurants are more interested in the next 8-week trend, how the market has responded to local government restrictions and COVID relaxation of rules than the historical data.
Yes, and someone has just
long-winded answer to the long-winded question.
We're getting good at that today. I think another person here is pointing out that this is a useful tool for marketing departments as well, which is but something I always used to, back in my revenue management days, where if we were forecasting out and we were forecasting a poor July for whatever reason, however long out, you could go to marketing and say, well, July is not looking good. We're not anticipating much demand. And that gives the marketing team the opportunity to maybe put some summer packages or whatever it is together to generate that demand, to try and increase it. And of course, from a finance person's point of view, looking at this and thinking, actually, our cash flow is going to be pretty dire at the end of September next year, if this is how it's going to look. Again, that will give the marketing him or her the evidence they need to go to their marketing manager and say, right, we need to generate some more revenue specifically for the end of September because our cash flow is going to be potentially in crisis. So yes, that's just spreading the use across the whole management team, from finance, revenue management, marketing, the whole lot. And there is another question here. So I'm going to read it on the fly. So if the RevPlan has its own forecasting methodology, how would the RevPlan system forecast differ from the ideas forecast? Right. So I guess the question is, what's the difference between your traditional revenue management system and RevPlan?
Yeah, very good question. And again, what we found is, I just wanted to quickly address, because you've hit on something really important, Jane, in the marketing piece. So what we found is that actually marketing have been equally sort of outside of the loop from the finance community as revenue management have typically. So they've looked at the revenue management system for things like campaign management, what if technology to run those campaigns. But again, they've fallen into the same challenge that revenue management have, because finance are saying, well, it's subjective, it's volatile, I can't take that to the bank. And actually it leads into the second question that you've asked there. Because this is a standalone agnostic platform, we actually directly encourage pulling in, for example, our G3 revenue management forecast as a reference point. The kind of IP and the algorithms running the RevPlan forecast are based on financial transactions. They have a different methodology to them. I think over time, potentially, and again, our product management team would probably say they see a scenario where it feeds in and it's one, but it's just making that distinction between the demand forecast and the financial forecast. A lot of our clients and early adopters have said for short-term forecasting, they use their RMS forecast almost to the letter. But actually, as we all know, further out, 60, 90, 120 days out, that becomes really difficult. And finance have a bit more skepticism about the RMS forecast versus their own sort of default setting in finance, which is to rely on history and rely on financial market segmentation and trending. So the solution actually puts that proposition for both. So a system generated rev plan forecast and a G3 forecast as a reference spot.
Yes, I think we've got another comment in here from Martina, who's listening, who's a very, very similar question, and it says, so how does it work then? Can you do F&B forecasting via ideas too? So I think it's a similar question, that it is a separate system to the revenue management solution. It's a separate solution, but it will, I guess, take some of the forecasting from ideas. With that forecasting the rooms, and then it will do some algorithms to work out the rest of the income from F&B and spa, golf, whatever else it might be. And they make a comment here, I must read this bit out. We do bedroom forecast using ideas, which is brilliant, and part of our yield meeting. Thank you.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah. The problem is, as lovely as that feedback is, we've never really cracked the F&B, the other income part. So we obviously can do lots in terms of group segment, sales and catering. We've had solutions that have looked to provide yield management capability to meetings and event space, for example. However, we've never really moved beyond on the sort of revenue management side, that occupancy or that operational forecast, arrivals, departures. This is really transformative technologies. It takes that core foundation of the rooms forecast. Obviously, we're in the hotel business, right? Everything has to be driven by the rooms, who you've got in. But importantly, it makes the distinction between the residents, the non-residents, and then uses that data to then go and find the optimal F&B and other income forecasting. So it's really, really powerful. But the beauty is actually in the simplicity, which is why we found a lot of hotel companies, big organizations, have tried to crack this with a proprietary or an in-house tool. Where they've maybe fallen down is they've not been able to harness major SaaS sort of platforms to do it.
Yes, and of course, different guests are going to behave differently. If you've got a lot of people in on a sales and catering event, or they're attending a conference or an incentive weekend, or whatever it might be, they will behave differently to your business guests, and again to your leisure guests. So I guess the system is going to take all of that into consideration as well when putting its forecast together.
And it's an easy trap, exactly, for us to fall into, because what I've found is I've had to kick myself and say, clients will ask those exact questions, and then we'll say, oh, well, you have what if functionality, and you have special event management, but actually it's very different from a financial forecasting perspective. But actually there's so much financial and operational forecasting and budgeting has learned or can learn still from revenue management. So it's been fascinating for me personally in the last couple of years to see that play out in client conversations.
Okay, we've got another question that's come in, and it's a quick one. Can RevPlan also help with cost forecasting, or is it revenue? The clue might be in the name of the product there.
Yeah, so and it's a great question and something we don't shy away from. And again, I think it's really incumbent on responsible solution providers to recognise what they're brilliant at and what they're not great at, and actually. Clients that have said to us, will this do planning? Will this drive my P&L reporting? No, it won't. And that's reflective in the investment, if I'm honest. So some of those, that's quite a busy technology space. James, you know better than anyone. So if you're talking about payroll solutions, from Sage and Sun and SAP and others that can drive a lot of the payroll and the planning, we've made a conscious decision to not get involved in that space. What our system does with RevPlan, it will enable planning, payroll, and all of those time efficiencies, those operational efficiencies. So some clients have kind of likened it to the bit they're missing, to the sweet spot. RevPlan provides the answer to that, and it integrates beautifully with their FP&A solution, their payroll solution, or their finance system.
And it has been the missing part of the jigsaw in forecasting for such a long time, and it's been talked about for such a long time. So it's an absolute delight to see that there is now a product out there that is genuinely doing it, and not sort of trying to botch bits together to come up with a solution. So yes, there are a few more questions, but I think we're coming towards the end of our time, and I don't like to overrun because I know people will have other things to attend. So we'll have a good read through of the questions and the comments in the chat afterwards, and address those either to the individual who's raised them, or when we post this on the website afterwards, and Ideas will do the same. If we might put that in the annotation around it so that you've got answers to those questions as well. But we have, sadly, very quickly, it seems, reached the end of our time allocated today. So it just falls to me to say thank you for listening and for putting those questions in. I do like it when we get some interactive questions. Big thank you to Neil and the team at Ideas for helping us put this masterclass together today. And I always like to remind people that the opinions expressed today are exactly that, they are opinions and should be treated as such. If you do need formal advice, then please approach Ideas Neil directly, or you can come to HOSPA and we can put you in touch with the relevant people and refer you to professional advisors or onto Ideas directly. As I mentioned, you will find the recordings of all our webinars and masterclasses with a summary of the key points on hospa.org. And today's webinar should be uploaded within 24 hours or so. So it's just thank you for listening. Thank you to Neil. Thank you to Ideas. And we look forward to seeing you all again very soon. Thank you very much.